Hello and welcome to Four Corners. Tonight we take you to Moscow for the third part of our series on President Trump and his ties to Russia. Over the past 2 weeks we've looked at how Donald Trump's business history made him vulnerable to Russian influence and how Russia targeted members of Trump's election campaign staff. In this episode we look at Vladimir Putin's endgame and the covert operation designed to wreak havoc on the US political system. You'll meet the Russian woman at the centre of the infamous Trump Tower meeting, involving the president's closest confidants, including his own son. That meeting is key to the allegation of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. Some of the world's most senior intelligence officials at the time of Putin's assault on America spoke to Four Corners for this programme, warning of a brazen threat to Western democracy. Russia is a mystery, wrapped in a riddle, inside an enigma. Churchill's words, written in the time of Stalin, still resonate today in modern Russia, where the great dictator's true successor has strengthened his hold on the Kremlin. Vladimir Putin's meticulously stage-managed inauguration last month, the culmination of an equally stage-managed election victory. It was his virtual coronation as president for life.
He used to be president. Now he's chief of the nation. He's the supreme leader. He's chief of the tribe because of the West. Because we feel threatened, and at the time of being threatened, we gather around the leader and we don't ask questions.
He really believes he is Messiah. He really believes that he is given to Russia by law. And he really believes that the longer he stays in power, the better it is for the country.
Messiah or supreme leader, Vladimir Putin embraces Russia's deep religious traditions, gives thanks, as here at Easter, to the God whose worship his one-time communist comrades outlawed.
Christos воскресе! Christos воскресе! Christos воскресе!
There's a strong sense in which those bells are tolling for Vladimir Putin. By immersing himself in Russian tradition, he's made himself a modern Tsar. He embodies nostalgia for Russia's past greatness and the more recent power of the Soviet Empire. But the dark side of that nostalgia is a potent sense of grievance, a grievance that the world has undermined or taken away Russia's rightful place in the world. Putin believes the West has conspired against his Russia. It's one of the reasons he feels justified in conspiring against them.
The more inflated his image of himself becomes, the bigger the enemy needs to be. Like, who is he protecting Russia from? Well, it can only be the United States. As far as Putin is concerned, and as far as most Russians are concerned, Russia has been at war with the United States, not a Cold War, but a hot war, in Ukraine since 2014.
Putin's sense of grievance was inflamed when the US imposed economic sanctions in retaliation for Russia's military assault on Ukraine and annexation of Crimea.
Russia's decision to send troops into Crimea has rightly drawn global condemnation. I'm authorizing sanctions on Russian officials, entities operating in the arms sector in Russia, and individuals who provide material support to senior officials of the Russian government.
The most comprehensive set of sanctions against the Russian government ever in hundreds of years of history between the United States and Russia. The Russian government and the Russian business community was shocked. Never before in history has the chief of staff of the president of Russia been on a sanctions list. That is something remarkable and new.
As much as Obama's actions hurt Russia, Vladimir Putin remained intractable.
Есть ли, тем не менее, какие-то обстоятельства, если представить, при которых вы были бы готовы отдать Крым и Севастополь?
Вы что, с ума сошли, что ли? Нет таких обстоятельств и не будет никогда.
In 2016, as the presidential race in the United States narrowed to two candidates, the Russians were watching closely.
They're astute students of the United States. They have expertise on us, and they understand our country very well. They maintain a very large and sophisticated spying apparatus within the United States. They watch our television, they read our publications, they read our newspapers.
The people of Crimea, from what I've heard, would rather be with Russia than where they were. And you have to look at that also.
They figured that Trump would be much better to deal with on a whole range of issues, and certainly among which would be sanctions, or perhaps being more benign or treating the situation in Ukraine more benignly than the prior administration or a Clinton administration would.
Vladimir Putin's plot against America was in preparation before the campaign. The plot was multifaceted, involving human agents, social media manipulation, and a devastating cyber attack.
They've always been gathering intelligence and getting themselves positioned on networks. What has changed is a growing evidence that they want to use those accesses to do destructive things rather than just sit and watch and gather.
During the election campaign, Robert Hannigan was head of Britain's GCHQ, the UK's highly secretive signals intelligence organisation. It's rare for GCHQ to speak publicly, but the cyber assault on the US marked a new worrying trend in Russia's methods.
It reflects a growing sense, clearly, in Moscow that their stake in this is reducing. They don't care anymore, that they have been badly treated by the West in some way, and they no longer worry about being called out. So that is a big change. It's the reflection of a capability in cyber which they invested in very heavily over 10 years ago, people and money, and that's paying off and they're using it.
Russia's biggest cyber coup in the US election was the attack on the servers of the Democratic National Committee and the personal email account of campaign chairman John Podesta.
In the case of the DNC and the John Podesta emails, they clearly thought, here's something that is really valuable if we want to damage the electoral process in general and one side in particular, and they made a political decision to use it. So that is new and a new level of aggression.
It was disseminated primarily through WikiLeaks, and we suspect a cutout from the Russians to WikiLeaks, and that's how it was exposed.
And do we know the extent to which that was pre-planned, or that there was communication with WikiLeaks prior to the exfiltration taking place?
I can't comment on that.
It's obviously something that was being looked at.
Well, of course.
It's a sign of strange times when Julian Assange, once reviled by Republicans, finds he has real admirers in the Trump camp. Do you still think Assange is a hero?
Yes, I really do. I think Assange, first of all, I don't buy the idea that he's a Russian asset or that WikiLeaks is a Russian front. I reject that.
Roger Stone, a long-time advisor to Donald Trump, is one of the president's fiercest defenders.
They not only surveilled Donald Trump, but they also now, as we broke here on our InfoWars, they infiltrated his campaign.
He claimed during the campaign to be in contact with Assange and hinted prior knowledge of the hacked emails. Stone is now under investigation by the special prosecutor.
Well, politics is full of bluffing and posturing.
And in some case, outright lies.
No, I wouldn't say there are any lies here at all. There is no evidence that supports this idea that I had advance notice of the content.
And yet,
evidence of it.
Now Mr. Mueller has clearly spoken to a number of your associates.
He has, and you'll find no evidence of those things. But I do understand that a runaway federal prosecutor, as we say in this country, can indict a ham sandwich.
They hacked the Democratic Party, spilled this stuff out in 2 leaks in 2016 with the express goal of damaging Hillary Clinton and undermining her. So that's the crime. And then the question is, did Donald Trump know about this?
Did Trump know? That question is at the heart of Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller's investigation into whether there was collusion between Trump and the Russians during the election campaign. The biggest story pointing to the possibility of collusion broke the following year, 6 months into Trump's troubled presidency.
We begin tonight with Donald Trump Jr. acknowledging he did meet with a Russian.
News of the infamous meeting in Trump Tower at the height of the presidential election campaign created a firestorm which has yet to be extinguished.
The material was part of a Russian government effort to aid his father's candidacy.
When you read the parts about the Russian government or Russia supporting your father, did that put off any sirens in your head?
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I think this was, again, just basic information that was going to be possibly there. I don't even think my sirens, went up, or the antennas went up at this time because of it, because it wasn't the issue that it's been made out to be over the last, 9 months, 10 months.
To understand what happened in the now notorious meeting, you have to go back 3 years to the Miss Universe pageant of 2013, when notions of a Donald Trump presidency were the stuff of fantasy.
You have a special announcement where the Miss Universe pageant will be held.
At that time, Trump was preparing to go to Russia with love.
The Miss Universe pageant will be held at Crocus City Hall in Moscow, Russia. So get ready!
Trump had a friendly Russian oligarch ready to pay for it, and a plan to meet Vladimir Putin.
Trump was obsessed with meeting Putin. He hoped that Putin would come to the Miss Universe pageant. He gets told that Putin will be calling while he's there, and he keeps asking, have we heard from Putin yet? Is Putin coming? Has Putin called?
Ну и президент конкурса, господин Дональд Трамп, вместе с нами сегодня здесь. Welcome. Добрый вечер. Hello.
Very nice. Nice to be with you.
I know that you're going to be on stage. Я говорю, что мистер Дональд Трамп принимает участие в этой церемонии сегодня.
Well, we're really excited, and to be in Moscow and Russia is just a very exciting thing for us. It's going to be an amazing pageant. It's the biggest in the world. It's going to be fantastic.
Trump didn't get to meet Putin during his brief Miss Universe tour to the Russian capital, but he was feted in Moscow by the pageant's money man, Aras Agalarov.
Trump is there, and also present is Aras Agalarov, the billionaire oligarch, runs a big company in Russia, real estate development company. He was known as Putin's builder because he'd done these huge construction projects for the Kremlin.
I know the Agalarovs, not personally, but of course those were people we knew well as a government and as an embassy. The Agalarovs are very close to the Kremlin. To be in their business, you have to be.
It was a fateful event for Donald Trump in more ways than one. It cemented his partnership with Agalarov, with whom he agreed to pursue a deal to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. And to the oligarch's son, Emin, who convinced him to appear in a music video.
Emin, wake up. Come on. Emin, let's get with it. You're always late. You're just another pretty face. I'm really tired of you. You're fired.
His son, Emin Agalarov, a pop singer, at the time married to the daughter of the president of Azerbaijan, and Emin's publicist, Rob Goldstone, this heavyset Brit who'd been a tabloid reporter in Australia at one point, actually.
The British PR man Rob Goldstone is a kind of court jester to the rich and famous.
Andy Pandy's coming to town, la 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 la. Andy Pandy's almost there, la 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 la.
A self-described useful idiot, one of the colourful characters central to the contentious Trump Tower meeting.
You don't know Andy Pandy? Oh, shall we look? Let's do our march. Andy Pandy's coming to town, la 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 la. Andy Pandy's halfway down, la 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 la.
The Moscow beauty pageant also generated the most salacious allegation in Trump's scandal-plagued presidency.
So look, what we're going to do now is we're going to a great party. You're all invited.
It was contained in the intelligence dossier put together for the Democrats during the US election by former MI6 agent Christopher Steele.
One of the allegations that comes up in the campaign in 2016 from the notorious Steele dossier is that Trump had prostitutes in his hotel room in Moscow who urinated on the bed in his hotel suite.
Steele's informant claimed that Russian spies filmed the alleged encounter at the Ritz-Carlton as compromat, compromising material which could be used against the future president.
It had serious implications. And, you know, it is worth noting that sexual compromat was something very much in the FSB's playbook. There's never been any confirmation for this allegation, even though it was the most sensational and widely publicized allegation in the Steele dossier.
And Trump has pushed back very hard.
And Trump has said it's fake, it's nonsense.
Knowing Donald Trump for 40 years, knowing his tastes and the fact that he's an extreme germaphobe, the idea of him being involved in the kinky scene that's described in these documents just, I find unlikely.
The uncorroborated allegations of sexual antics in the Ritz-Carlton have coloured the reception of Steele's claims of collusion during the campaign. The special prosecutor's investigation has focused more closely on the Trump Tower meeting and how the Russians Trump met in Moscow came to be at his headquarters at the height of the campaign. We went to Moscow to meet the female lead in the Trump Tower drama. Natalia Veselnitskaya is a lawyer whose client list includes Aras Agalarov and another Russian oligarch hit hard by US sanctions. Some claim she's a Russian agent working for the Kremlin.
I wouldn't call her just a lawyer. What I would say is that she's a Russian operative. The way the Russian government operates is they don't, people don't have business cards from the secret police.
Сара, вы можете задавать любой вопрос. Абсолютно.
Are you a spy or an agent for the Russian government?
No, of course not. I work only myself.
Were you working for the Russian government when you went to Trump Tower?
Ну нет, конечно. Я реально представляю интересы российского гражданина в Америке. Я реально борюсь против достаточно серьезной, мощной государственно-финансовой структуры в Соединенных Штатах Америки.
When you read about yourself, about Natalia, in particularly the American media, do you recognize yourself in the stories?
No, nothing about myself.
The meeting at Trump Tower was set in train by British publicist Rob Goldstone. June the 3rd, 2016, Goldstone was contacted by his client, the pop star Emin Agalarov, asking him to set up a meeting with the Trumps. Goldstone immediately contacted Don Jr. Emin just called. The Crown Prosecutor of Russia met with his father Aras this morning and offered to provide the Trump campaign with some official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary and would be very useful to your father. This is obviously very high-level and sensitive information, but is part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump. Don Jr.'s reply expressed no surprise or caution. If it's what you say, I love it. The source of the material referred to in the email was the General Prosecutor of Russia, not the Crown Prosecutor, as Goldstone called him.
Yuri Chaika is the General Prosecutor of Russia, and he's probably the most important person to Putin as the enforcer of Putin's will. He's a very important part of the whole apparatus of Putin's machine of repression.
Veselnitskaya has close connections to the General Prosecutor and admits giving him the potentially damaging information about donors to Hillary Clinton.
Господину Чайке я лично докладывала я сейчас точно не могу сказать, но, в общем, за много-много месяцев до этой встречи. Более того, я обращалась официально с этой же информацией в его офис.
Some big numbers coming in, very big numbers. I'm truly honored by your support.
By the time of Goldstone's offer of incriminating information from the Russians, Donald Trump had secured the Republican nomination for president. Behind the scenes, Don Jr. and Goldstone set up the meeting, inviting the Russian lawyer to Trump headquarters in New York to meet Don Jr., campaign chairman Paul Manafort, and Don Jr.'s brother-in-law, Jared Kushner.
I don't know why it rose to that level, other than perhaps the candidate's son thinks this meeting can be productive because his friend in London says this woman is wired.
Did you know that the Agalarovs were promising damaging material on Clinton?
Категорически нет, этого просто, мне кажется, совершенно невозможно. Они помогали не Трампу, они помогали мне.
Hello.
2 days before the meeting, Donald Trump began promising he'd soon reveal fresh dirt on Hillary Clinton.
I am going to give a major speech on probably Monday of next week, and we're going to be discussing all of the things that have taken place with the Clintons. I think you're going to find it very informative and very, very interesting.
Rob Goldstone said that the meeting took place because of the Russian government's support for Donald Trump. Was that your understanding of why you were going?
Нет, конечно. Меня мог, безусловно, использовать только в этом смысле один человек. Тот, который сегодня себя называет полезным идиотом. Роб Голдстоун. С тем, чтобы показать, какой он крутой. Он общается, вау, с королевским прокурором и с королевскими адвокатами.
Just to be clear, this is during the election campaign. It's a very intense period. To get a meeting in Trump Tower, even with Donald Trump Jr., you must have known that you were expected to deliver something to the Trump campaign.
Это вам так кажется? Моя история подтверждает обратное.
On the day of the meeting, June 9th, 2016, Veselnitskaya was in the US defending another Russian oligarch facing charges in New York. The reason you were in the United States was to defend your client against money laundering charges in New York.
От ложных обвинений я бы добавила.
It's that case, she says, that took her to Trump Tower. The charges arose from allegations that her client had profited from the murder of a Russian lawyer called Magnitsky. Magnitsky, who was beaten to death in a Moscow jail cell, was the whistleblower in a massive fraud that hit Bill Broder's Russia-based investment company.
Sergei Magnitsky was effectively murdered because he was my lawyer. He would still be alive today if he hadn't worked for me.
Despite making powerful enemies in Russia, Broder devoted himself to campaigning against those connected to his lawyer's death. In 2012, the US Congress responded with the Magnitsky Act, freezing assets and banning visas for those involved.
What we had inadvertently stumbled across was the Achilles heel of the Putin regime. The property they have and the money they have, they don't keep in Russia. They take that and put it into Western banks, Western real estate, and other things. And the Magnitsky Act puts all of that at risk.
Распечатки его телефонных переговоров с определенными...
Veselnitskaya is Broder's Russian nemesis. She's been tasked with lobbying to overturn his sanctions and discredit him personally. What is the story?
Это показания, это реальная история о Магнитском России и реальная история о Браудере.
And this is the information that you were trying to share with American politicians, with US politicians?
Конечно.
She spent 3 years prior to the Trump Tower meeting and millions of dollars trying to shut me down.
Do you recall your response when you realized that she was part of that group of people in the Trump Tower meeting?
I wasn't surprised because she was poking at every different place where she could find opportunity. But I was a little bit amazed and frankly impressed that she was able to get to Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and Paul Manafort.
Veselnitskaya came to Trump Tower with a Russian lobbyist and an executive from Agalarov's company. She had a memo with her, which included an allegation of tax avoidance by donors to Hillary Clinton. This was far from the explosive information promised in the Goldstone email. But the claim Clinton received dirty money did spark the interest of Don Jr.
И он мне задал, по сути, один такой, в общем-то, уточняющий вопрос. А у вас есть финансовые документы, подтверждающие, что вот эти вот незаконные деньги, как вы говорите, поступили в фонд Хиллари Клинтон? Чем, собственно говоря, ввел меня достаточно такое серьезное удивление. Я говорю, что а каким образом они у меня могут находиться, в общем-то.
After the Russian failed to produce documents, you can almost sense the disappointment of the Trump team in her descriptions. Campaign chairman Paul Manafort. Did Paul Manafort ask you any questions?
No.
Nothing. He asked you nothing?
Nothing, nothing.
And Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner.
Джареда Кушнера я восприняла как молодого, юного, молодого человека, который зашел на несколько минут и вышел из комнаты.
Veselnitskaya rejects the idea that there was any collusion involved in the meeting.
Мотив, объясните мне, причину, зачем Кремлю это надо? Для чего? Что такое нужно было? О чем договариваться с Трампом? И главное, что могла Россия сделать для того, чтобы Трамп победил? Сегодня Мюллер даже после года своего великого расследования до сих пор объяснить народу не может, что он сделал, чтобы выяснить это.
And what do you think about people accepting a meeting on those terms?
Well, what it reflects is an interest in collusion. Whether anything came of it, I don't. That's yet to be determined. But I do wonder whether that's just one vignette that became public, and were there other such encounters?
Dan Hoffman was the CIA's station chief in Moscow and one of the agency's most respected Russian analysts. He sees Putin's hand behind these events, but not simply to boost Donald Trump's chances, rather to disrupt US democracy.
That's my premise behind what was going on in Trump Tower in June of 2016. What I think Vladimir Putin was doing was deliberately leaving a trail of breadcrumbs from Trump Tower to the Kremlin. It makes a lot of sense to me because I see the full spectrum of Russian intelligence operations, all the way from extraordinarily clandestine secret stuff that the media would never be able to find. And frankly, if the media can find something that Russia did, like the meeting at Trump Tower, then it was meant to be found. Eventually, we'll get to them, and eventually the media will expose them. And what Vladimir Putin was counting on was a little bit of a media feeding frenzy.
We have breaking news on the Russia case tonight.
President Trump, quote, personally dictated that initial misleading statement from his son, Donald Trump Jr., when first asked about that June 2016 campaign meeting with the Russians.
Mueller investigating a possible cover-up.
Neither side got anything out of the meeting, and later attempts to cover it up have led the president into even more dangerous territory, with a special prosecutor looking at whether Trump or his team committed obstruction of justice, ensuring just the sort of chaos that the Russians may have intended all along.
What I think Vladimir Putin realized is he could inject this virus into our political system and set us fighting against each other, instead of remembering that the enemy is not Google, Facebook, Twitter, Democrats, Republicans. It's the guy in the Kremlin.
Please welcome retired United States Army Lieutenant General and former Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Michael Flynn.
By the time of the Republican convention in July 2016, the Russian virus had infected the Trump team at the highest levels.
Lock her up. That's right. Yes, that's right. Lock her up.
Retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn was Director of Defense Intelligence under President Obama. Trump's most senior military backer, he became the most significant casualty of the Russia probe.
The next president of the United States, right here.
A few months before the convention, Flynn was invited by the Russian television network Russia Today to their 10th anniversary gala. Created by Putin, Russia Today was described by the American intelligence community as a propaganda network.
Why wouldn't we invite Michael Flynn? As any media organization, we invited all kinds of high-rank officials from different countries that we could get. We invited all sorts of people. Mike Flynn came. Good.
What
He
is
came.
it, though? What is it about? I understand it's a broad series of invitations, but why Michael Flynn? What is it about him?
Also, your question, why did you invite him, implies that it was something strange to invite him, or extraordinary to invite him.
The former director of Defense Intelligence, who was paid $45,000 to speak at the event, was seated next to Putin.
Putin was very surprised when I told him who was at his table. He said, really? All right.
And why do you think he was surprised?
Well, because he's from the special services as well, and apparently special services people don't do those things too often. I don't know, I've never been into special services, and I don't know how it works, really, but probably he knows better, and he was surprised.
So Putin and I, in fact, agree that it's an interesting
I knew you
invitation.
would say that. Yeah. No, it's interesting that he agreed. It's not interesting that we invited him.
When it was later exposed and had its negative impact on General Flynn's reputation, that only served Vladimir Putin's interests.
Do solemnly swear. Do solemnly swear.
Trump named Flynn as National Security Advisor in the newly minted Trump administration, one of the most sensitive posts in government.
Enemies, foreign and domestic.
He resigned after 17 days for lying about his conversations with Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak during the transition. In December 2017, he pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about those conversations in which he discussed President Obama's sanctions on Russia.
I think it's very, very unfair what's happened to General Flynn, the way he was treated, and the documents and papers that were illegally, I stress that, illegally leaked.
I think that whole story was good for Russia, and they did play a part in it. The Russians and Vladimir Putin, I mean, he's a, retired, they say in Russian there's no such thing as a former intelligence officer. He's kind of playing chess. He's thinking a few moves ahead, and he doesn't always let his pawns know exactly what his strategy is to tip over our king.
We want America to understand who Donald Trump the man is, not just Donald Trump the candidate.
Campaign chairman Paul Manafort ran the Republican convention. For decades, Manafort was a political gun for hire in leadership contests across the globe, most recently in Ukraine. His former lobbying partner, Roger Stone, claims to have recommended Manafort for his role on the campaign.
Knowing of Trump's legendary cheapness, he offered to work for free. Why would he work for free? Because he understood that he could earn future economic opportunity. Cashing in, leveraging, those seem to be somewhat negative words, but it's a legitimate reason for wanting to win.
At the same time, Manafort's name was surfacing in the memos that make up the Steele dossier. Christopher Steele's sources, providing raw, untested allegations, named Manafort as a central figure colluding with Russia.
Manafort is one of the figures who was allegedly an intermediary between the Trump campaign and the Russians. Not implausible, given the work that Manafort had been doing for years for the pro-Russian political party in Ukraine and its leader, Mr. Yanukovych.
Manafort's moment in the sun was brief. Revelations of his business dealings before he joined the campaign with Russian and Ukrainian oligarchs forced him to resign. Manafort is now in jail awaiting trial, indicted by the special prosecutor on 25 charges, including fraud and money laundering. He pleaded not guilty.
This is the same man who trousered $75 million from Ukraine, according to Robert Mueller's indictment, $75 million. Was he really going to work for free? And if he wasn't working for free, who was actually paying him?
Washington is not only James Clapper's neighborhood, it's in his blood. He served in the US intelligence community for 50 years, rising to the highest levels. It took the extraordinary circumstances of Russia's interference and an indifferent president to turn him into a public figure.
When I realized the magnitude of what the Russians had been doing, I did become alarmed about it, given the president's attitude about Russia and his willingness to believe the assurances of Putin, who says he didn't meddle, over his own intelligence community. I thought was quite alarming.
In January 2017, James Clapper and his fellow intelligence chiefs briefed the president-elect on Russia's intervention in the election and the contents of the Steele dossier, including the scurrilous allegations about Trump's visit to Russia. A few days later, Trump turned on them with a vengeance.
I think it was disgraceful that the intelligence agencies allowed any information that turned out to be so false and fake out. I think it's a disgrace. And I say that, and that's something that Nazi Germany would have done and did do. I think it's a disgrace.
I've never witnessed an assault on the intelligence community like that. Well, actually, my career progression with President Trump is I went from being a Nazi to a choker to a political hack on Veterans Day, no less, and more recently a liar and leaker.
They were plotting against my election.
Throw out all the people that have been involved in the phony Trump investigation.
The real FBI, not the scum on top.
I have this witch hunt constantly going on for over 12 months now.
As the president has come under increasing pressure in the second year of the Mueller investigation, Trump and his backers have become more hostile. Revelations the FBI had used an intelligence informant to approach members of Trump's campaign staff led to claims the agency spied on the campaign.
We now call it Spygate. You're calling it Spygate. A lot of bad things have happened. If you look at Clapper, he sort of admitted that they had spies in the campaign.
A battle is now being waged in the United States not only between political opponents, but against the very institutions that were built to protect America.
The president advocated and was elected on policies that deeply threaten a two-party duopoly, kind of a permanent government. Dwight Eisenhower called it the military-industrial complex. Today it's called the deep state.
That deep state, according to President Trump and his backers, includes the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the wider US intelligence community. It's a battle that James Clapper says ignores the real enemy.
Russia is the existential threat to the United States. They are a foe of ours, and I think right now the indifference to that imperils the country.
The Kremlin's puppet master now has America dancing to his discordant tune. He couldn't have planned it better.